Are we going now?
Yeah.
Is my clock running? My 10 minutes?
Yes.
Hey, this is Chris at Art Secret Studio, and I'm interrupting the class because that's my favorite thing to do, because then it's about me. I was looking at a church painting, and it's, I don't know, I'll make up the size, 20 feet, and I've walked past it many times at the Smithsonian, or no, it's the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. And I have someone doing landscapes in my Monday class, and I really feel like the textures could be more of a variety in the landscape, things that you might see in a Sargent painting. And I said to Lori, I don't believe I see that in people, in landscape painters, and I'd like to see it more. And I said, do you think it's possible we could do this? So what happens now is I open up some pictures I took from Washington. I'm looking at the church painting because I knew she's a big luminous fan and tonal painter, Hudson River School painter. And the Hudson River School is about this glory of God and this power of God. And then you have this massive tornado or hurricane coming, and it's beautiful and scary. And you have this tiny man in the picture way at the bottom. And that's what it was like in the beginning. The second half of the Hudson River School, they said, yeah, but we're kind of tired of the Civil War and the battle and the loss and the division and all this stuff. Can we just go to the Adirondacks and the mountains and get away from it all? Can't we just see the beauty in everyone and everything? And they start seeing these beautiful landscapes, just serene oranges and reds and pinks and blues, and they're real. And they're doing it without a single stroke. So now there's no strokes and there's a silence. And then all of a sudden I started looking at the last phase of the Hudson River School, and I don't know where Church fits in there, but he's definitely not a luminous and he's not really a tonalist. So I consider him at the end where they're merging the two. And I'm looking at his painting on my big iMac, and I'm seeing the textured brushstrokes, and it's beautiful. And all of a sudden I'm like an ADD person. Well, I don't have to imagine being an ADD person, but I'm like an ADD person, and my eye is going here, and then it's jumping here, and it's jumping here, and he's leading me around the room with all these textures, and I kept saying, oh my gosh, this is spectacular. Lori needs to see this. So let me show you a few things. So in this part, I did this charcoal drawing, and I don't know if some of you know, but when I do charcoal on the light sides of her face, I use a F pencil. And you notice the right side's lighter than the left side? That's just a dig at my photographer, yes. Okay, but in her hair, and it doesn't show up as well. In her hair, I wanted it to be so soft. You can keep it on that. Okay. I wanted it to be so soft, like a baby's hair. It's surreal soft in the beginning. Then it ends up like your hair. Yeah. And there's a softness to it. And in real life, the charcoal was just beautiful. It was that. I achieved that. It doesn't reproduce that way. So you can make a texture look like the object. And as I keep going, another way of doing that is in Sargent's painting here. And he makes the texture look like the attitude and the personality. And he has this lady who is, an aristocrat. She's got position and place. And his flamboyant brushstrokes and contrast and pop that he's putting in this painting is saying, look here, look here, look here. And this is her position. But also, don't forget this part. With jewelry, it's very different than a lot of the classical drawing rules. So we say your highlights get darker farther from the light source and darker farther from you when possible. Someone in the room says it. And then someone in the room says, but your contrast gets less farther away, and your darks get lighter, your edges get softer, every gets fuzzier, softer, cooler, and uglier and grayer. Except jewelry. You see, what I think Sargent does so well with jewelry is the highlight on the ear closer to you will have a very strong, sharp contrast. And then the ear farther away, he'll have the same contrast. And then if someone else is behind him, they'll have the same contrast. And that's what makes metal look like metal. So a lot of her whites look the same Because when it comes to metals and jewelry and things like that, and also a psychological attitude, you're going to see the contrast the same. And we discussed that in the water pictures last week, that I think we treat water like jewelry, and sometimes the sharp edges are sharper than they should be, but that's what makes it look like water. But that was last week's talk, and I can't cut into my 10 minutes. Okay, so the next way, so this is contrast as developing a texture of an object and psychological. Okay. The next thing that happens is you have Ong, president of the French Academy, while Sargent was in that area doing those things. And what happens with Sargent, or with Ong, he paints all the highlights on the jewels different. Gold is different than the turquoise, whatever the clear pink is, you know, the clear glass or whatever it was. I'm sure it wasn't glass. You know, each metal, each jewelry piece, very much like the Harnett, where I make you do the brass highlight is different than the ivory highlight, and it's different than the pottery or the smoking pipe or the different things. Each highlight has a different contrast. Very important. Ellie, are you looking at the clock? How much time do I have?
You're over 3 minutes.
6 minutes to go. 3 minutes. Sargent's watercolor. So let me talk about watercolor here. Okay. The best way I've heard of this is one of our students who was in here for 10 years, Dylan Scott Pierce, who's like one of the greats. And he calls it a 1 minute wet, a 2 minute wet, a 3 minute wet, a 5 minute wet. Now I'm ad-libbing, I don't have a clue what I'm talking about, and my watercolors aren't worth looking at. But I can tell this top part here, by her eyes, this purple is within the first minute. So you wet the whole paper, you put a little purple down, and it just bleeds, runs. Then a minute later, the next mark is made, the brown part right here. And then a minute later, that's made. And each minute that goes, the paper dries and it stops bleeding and starts getting sharper. And then eventually, 5 minutes later, you have that mark. So Sargent is timing when he makes the marks. Oh, you mean like a plan? Oh, I need this hair to be the sharpest and those to be the softest. So this is a 1 minute wet. This is a 2 minute wet. That's a 3 minute wet. This is a 5 minute wet. Oh, you mean you must have a story, right? I'm still at 6 minutes, right? Okay. So that's making a mark that could deal with her personality. I've got to get to the church painting before I run out of time. I'm looking at this Degas in DC, and there's no brushstrokes. Well, wait a minute, we're talking about brushstrokes all month. We got to talk about some brushstroke here. There's none. Do you know what it reminds me of? Someone who's watching the play or the stage, and all the action is on the stage, because you see his highlight and his texture and his contrast is in the white dress. So right here, let me back up. You know that dress, that took 2-3 days to paint. Because the way he painted it, he had to wait for it to dry to go over it with the top. Then he glazed on it, went over at the top again, and that was a layering effect. He did more work in that part of the painting than the whole painting. There's no variation in the rest of it. Her face is flat. There's no 3 sides to a box. You know, and it's really, if you make up the story, it's someone, maybe she's a patron and she's paying for the play. Maybe she's a parent watching her child on the play. Who knows what it is? But she's hidden in the shadows, fondly looking because of the color is cheerful. It's not a negative dreary color. And she's watching the action on stage from a distance. But she's close, but nobody knows she's there. There's a peacefulness. I'm looking at the textures. So now I can start. Church is landscape, 20 feet, 10 feet. I don't know how big it is. It's a monstrous thing. You have to walk past it to see 80% of the Washington Museum. I've had to walk past it 25, 30 times. This is the first time I've looked at it. I guess being observant is not a prerequisite to being an artist. So now, this is what I noticed. Let me talk about plein air, going outside and painting. Instead of trying to paint Niagara Falls when you're outside in an hour and a half, Church paints little studies. And in this study, it looks like to me, now we don't know what he's really doing. So what happens with Church is in this study, he's figuring out what kind of brushstroke would make the water tumble. What kind of brushstroke would make the foam at the bottom and the spraying of the water? And I'm going to say, what kind of sound would you hear? If you're an ADD person, not to bring up names or anyone in the room, what would that person hear at that part of the painting? And as I keep going, and you can see how the texture of the strokes are different in this area than they are in this area. Even his sketch, he has sharp lines, he has tumbling lines, he has fuzzy lines. So when you were painting your hair, I'm thinking, hey, can you take the pencil and go over the charcoal and use your eraser, use your finger, go over the eraser, go over the charcoal, and layer a variety of different mark making. Which mark would you leave the most? I don't know. What's the story about? Do any of these marks support your story? Another study. And in each place, he makes a different type of mark in different areas. Another study. Look at those marks. Very different, almost like these, like the water's tumbling and he's trying to make these little circly seas or something. Whoever, I made that up, but I mean, you know, he's making a different kind of mark for the water. What if Church is the conductor? And what if there are sounds in one part of the fall that are different than another part of the fall? And those sounds are different than that part of the fall and this part of the fall. What if this is his symphony and this is his opus? What are the sounds that you would hear from the orchestra at the symphony that represents this dark, deep water? Because I don't know about you, but the dark, deep water for me represents, if you get too close to the water here, it's a little too deep and the force is a little too strong and you're toast. Getting that water, you're going over the falls. Cello. The cello? How about some kind of drum? Some kind of threatening drum. Boom, boom, boom. How about whatever? What instrument would you play in this part of the painting? What would you use for the storm? See, the purple storm is lifting and going away. What instrument would you play? What kind of mark would you make in that area that represents the instrument and the mark for that spot? I'm asking.
None. I mean, not a lot of textured brushstrokes.
Yeah.
It's calm.
But the storm is still there. It's a threatening storm. The calm part is in the middle of the sky. That's here. That's the calm part. That's where everyone in the instrument, that's where the conductor is saying is bring it all down, folks. Real quiet in this part. Real quiet. And then I keep going and I say, okay, so what instrument are you playing in this raging, beautiful blue-green that says, wow, this is awe. This is amazing. What kind of mark do you make? How long do you drag? Transparent color or not? What kind of mark would you make? What if you took that drawing and you diagrammed each part and then you put a brushstroke that went with it? What if you said, I'm using oleo gel in that part, I'm using impasto medium in this part, I'm using a bristle brush here, a sable brush here, a synthetic brush here? What if this became his opus? Because here's the weird thing about this whole thing, okay? Everywhere in this painting, he's got different marks in the white mist in the back where the rainbow is. He has different marks where these white areas are. Oh, he didn't paint this outside. This is dry paint over, wet paint over dry paint. This isn't a one-day painting. This is something he labors on. He makes different marks in this area, different marks where the fog is here, different marks where the bubbles are, different marks in the blue-green, that's transparent, and different marks in this deep area. Every part of this painting, every part of the painting is a different brushstroke. Okay, I buy that, no problem. Then someone in the class, Lori, the person who I did the talk for, she said, you know, when we were in Dallas, the class went to see the Sorolla show. She went a day early to see the church paintings, the same guy, and she wanted to see what it looked like in real life. And this is his painting. It's called The Iceberg. She loved the color. She said it wasn't as dark as the photograph in the lower right is, but it was just beautiful. And she said there wasn't a single brushstroke, not a single texture. Same artist. I'm learning how to do social media. Yeah. I have 300 followers in Instagram. And then I saw it says waiting for your first post. I've had it for 10 years. Okay, maybe I'm not learning how the social media works, but my followers are getting bigger. Yeah. Okay. So in one painting, there's brushstrokes are variation, they're everywhere. And in the next painting, almost as big, not a single brushstroke. Is he saying the iceberg? Not a sound. Not a whisper. And is he saying at Niagara Falls? Oh my gosh, the rainbow is stunning where the mist is coming up and it's so peaceful and it's so beautiful. Oh my gosh. And now the ADD person kicks in. I'm not saying him, it's me. Now the raging water is coming down here. Oh, look at the beautiful color here. And it's transparent with oleo gel. Oh, I love how the water is hitting the rock and splashing and making those sounds. And you're jumping from sound to sound like you need medication. Which is, Ellie has thought that about me ever since the beginning. And she's still shaking her head. That's the difference. When you were in high school, you would have never said yes. Now you say yes. In fact, you shouldn't laugh so hard because then one believes you really believe this. Oh. Does this make sense to me? So let me bring it all back in together. Instead of going outside and painting your Niagara Falls, what if you did a bunch of studies and said, you know, in this part of the thing, wherever it is, wherever you go, in this part, this is the part I like. What kind of marks could I make? How much contrast would I use? And then what if you went another week or another day and you went to a different part of that painting and said, what kind of marks would I make at that part of the painting? What kind of contrast? How would I use my mark, my charcoal, my pencil? And what if you did 4, 5, 6, 7 studies, figuring out what kind of brush you would use, what kind of texture, and how much contrast? And then you say, okay, but I'm going to take that original picture of the whole thing, and now I'm going to see if I can put them all together. Because here's the problem with the whole thing. Sargent's El Halejo. When I take a 47 megapixel Nikon camera, okay, Z9, $6,400, $2,400 lens, $300, $400 worth of mics, $500 worth of video card, and I take a picture, I think, you know, I got a great picture, I can paint this. But you know what's missing? Church, looking at every single part of this and experimenting to figure it out. Well, let me tell you about El Halejo. Sargent has so many studies in El Halejo that someone made a book of it, and this 200-page book is filled with all of his studies. Oh, you mean like Church and all his studies for that painting? You see, the camera's the problem. It's not you. It's the camera. We think the camera's enough, and I can just copy what we're doing. But these people started to realize there's a lot of words in this book. No pictures. Trust me, there's a lot of pictures. I don't know where they are. Oh, they're in the back. Okay. They're all plates in the back. So what happens with all the pictures though in this book is, trust me, there's pictures. No, what happens is when he does a painting, a sketch, he says, oh yeah, that's not it. Oh, I think it's color. Let's try red. Oh, I think it's yellow. Let's do blue. And every time he tries it, he keeps saying, oh no, that's not it. Oh, it's this. And then when it's over, he starts the big painting and it's 3 years into it and he says, it's not that. It's the diagonal line. And they have x-rays showing he changes the whole composition into diagonals. The studies tell you why you're attracted to that picture. Don't go outside and try to paint your Niagara Falls. These people didn't do it. Don't measure yourself against them and try to do what they didn't do. The camera is not your friend. Do I use it for great information? Yeah. Am I the first one to do all these studies? Yeah, I do all the studies. President Carter, I painted 28 drawings and painting sketches before I found the final image for the final thing, and then painted it 6 times. And you can't tell the difference between any of the 6. Oh, this one's 2 inches bigger, this is 4 inches bigger, this is 2 inches smaller, those kind of things. And when I was finished, I was finished. I don't look at it and say, oh, I wish I would have done this. I don't say that to any of them. They do what I wanted them to do. Does that make sense? So imagine it's you're the conductor and this is your opus. This is your symphony. And what's each area doing for you? And make a map. And say, this is what I'm going to do to each area and why. Does that make sense? I tried 10 minutes. It's just not happening.
48 minutes.
No, how long?
Down.
23 minutes study.
Okay. It's just not possible.
You can just speed it up.
Yeah, that's the part where I'm killing. Yeah, I understand. This is how it happens in the other thing. This is how I get it to 3 minutes.